And live. All right. Hello, creatives, community, kind folks out there. Welcome. It's Friday. It's the end of the week of our weekly deep dives down a particular subject, whatever that subject may be, and how do we use that particular subject in our tabletop RPG games. Well, today is Future Friday, and all week we've been talking about transhumanism, post-humanism, humanity plus, whatever the case may be, far future thinking of how science and technology would change the way, and not just change, but transform, maybe even eliminate the things that we hold dear in our modern society. And of course, taking those ideals and stretching them into our tabletop games, including Dungeons and Dragons, our pseudo-medieval realms from modern into far future. Well, today is Future Friday, so where do we go from here? Well, I thought we would talk about, and this is what's kind of the banner listing, is the red button problem, the existential threat. And I will describe to you what that is. But first, if you are someone who loves long form content and you are more of an audio individual, or you're someone who participates in Discord heavily, please go over to Fantasy Grounds College. Join the curriculum over there, find an administrator, learn how to use Fantasy Grounds. But once you're done with that and hanging out with the students, come down to the boiler room. So on the left, go to the side, slide all the way down. We're hanging out in the boiler room, and you can listen to the show simulcast live each day, Monday through Friday. So, okay, got that out the way. What is an existential threat? What do I mean by the red button problem? Well, even in our modern day, we have an issue where the least of the individuals have the greatest ability to cause the greatest harm amongst most of the population. So an example would be, if someone picks up a dagger and they're running around a medieval world and they're intent on killing everyone, they would have a pretty tough time doing it, considering that through lack of skill and potential and travel, that it would be very difficult for them to stab each and every individual in the world without them dying, right? Yes. And Deadman, the storyteller, also says that Eclipse Phase has a whole book about existential risks called X Risks. X Risks. And Eclipse Phase is a role-playing game that is completely emblematic of the transhumanist thinking and theories and such, not made real, but made into a role-playing game. And so this is the kind of things we're talking about. So existential threats are things that, if given time, energy, resources, if given motivation, if given potential, if unlocked, could essentially wipe out humanity. Now, there's a difference between just being a threat and wiping out humanity, but we're going to, in this context, I think we should include the idea of wiping out humanity as well. So, I mean, of causing extreme harm to humanity along with those existential threats. So for context, a lot of these threats in our modern day would include a plague or disease or some kind of infection, virus, bacteria that has no cure. That is one threat, which would and we've seen plenty of those things displayed in television, books, movies about a contagion that just sweeps through a region and cannot be stopped, often paired with zombie apocalypses as well. The aftermath of most post-apocalypse settings has something to do with whether it's nuclear war. Nuclear war, although technically isn't an existential threat because there is a chance that humanity will continue on. I'm specifically lumping it in here because I think it has such a dramatic effect on the way we live. It would completely destroy at least society, governments, the way we live. So that, I believe, that's included in that threat as well. So those are two threats that come upon it. But we also know of television shows like Preppers, or shows about, the end of the world. Like there are shows that talk about or even websites and things that talk about the top 10 ways life would end on Earth, whether they've come from radiation and solar flares, an impact from a planetary, external planetary thing like a comet or meteor swarm or something. Some people think that there's going to be the great volcanoes, and most of the world's volcanoes will erupt. There is Yeah, Pillar says, I'm of the strong, Black Death surviving bloodline. I fear no pathogens. Some feel that society itself will crumble and that we will be our own destruction simply by the death of our own civilization as we know it, that governments will crumble, economic systems will be known as a farce. Others see a post-apocalyptic setting where essentially all power is wiped out, that we would have some kind of electromagnetic pulse that wipes out all batteries, and for some strange reason, even dynamos and electrical circuits will go out. Every single computer system will be wiped clean, that kind of thing. And I suppose there are others out there, but those seem to be the top ones. But in a transhumanist thinking, many people fear the idea of putting some, or if not all of those threats, or creating new threats into the hands of fewer individuals who need less energy to do what they want. So all week we've been talking about cortical stacks and biomorphs living in biological bodies that are grown. We really didn't even talk about synthmorphs, which are essentially mechanical bodies that we could live in and survive in. We talked about, and yeah, we talked about some dark elements, you know, the sadomasochistic virtual realities and habitats filled with AI piloted bodies, and those people can, you know, using them. But we didn't really talk about the lone, I guess it's poignant today, the lone gunman given some sort of transhuman technology. An example would be, the greatest example I can think of right off the top of my head would be the idea of von Neumann nanotechnology. Nanotechnology run amok. So we understand nanotechnology as being like basically nano-sized, microscopic, essentially machines, not even machines, but purposeful built compounds and molecular structures that perform a duty that we want. So metachines, they're called metachines in eclipse phase, but essentially they're like nanotech machines in the bloodstream that are there to get rid of pathogens, to heal, to knit bone back together, to reconstruct flesh and reattach fiber in your body, maybe even improve them, maybe lace your muscles and tendons with something super strong and what have you. And probably goes hand in hand with any kind of like brain implant, to use nanotechnology to connect to, like, say the optical nerves and, you know, olfactory systems and such. But someone somewhere, the fear is that a von Neumann nanotechnology will exist that will continue to grow and propagate itself, much like printing another printer from a 3D printer, right? The idea is that, and the somewhat fear is that someone can buy a 3D printer, print out a whole nother 3D printer, keep their printed out 3D printer, and return the 3D printer that they borrowed. So thereby getting a free 3D printer, or at least relatively cheap 3D printer. Well, a nanotech that grows in and on itself. Yeah, Rickard says the replicators from Stargate as an example. I forgot the one, Stargate. Yeah, replicators in Stargate, the highly underused ones in Star Trek, where, you know, they're asking for Earl Grey hot, but they're not replicating the replicators, you know, and nanotech that's doing something like wiping out, I don't know, all biological life, or constructing something, or given an instruction to do something that, when out of control, is highly con- highly dangerous for humanity to live in. Nanotechnology might be used to, say, scrub the atmosphere of an alien planet. But if the nanotech is like, yeah, we're going to turn this into methane, and the human beings living there are like, yeah, we like to breathe like 18% oxygen to nitrogen combinations. Could you stop that? And, the eighth generation nanotech is like, sure, I'll stop. But the original nanotech is like, nah, I think we need to keep turning this oxygen into methane or what have you. And so, um, and unfortunately, yes, Rickard says sneaking in a small pattern change to the Star Trek replicator. Exactly, because nanotech is assumed to be programmed externally, or if it has a small change in what it's supposed to do is really the danger. So, for example, nanotech in the bloodstream might be there, might be very beneficial, but if let's say it was exposed to high radiation or an extreme electrical circuit or a signal from outside that, I don't know, starts to build, let's say, anthrax inside of your body instead. And the nanotechnology doesn't understand that it's harming you. It's just performing its job. It might be turning you into, I don't know, some kind of black oily sludge from the inside out. And oh, wow, we're still replicating. Let's turn all human life into black oily sludge because that's what we're supposed to do. Yeah, Rickard said instead of Earl Grey hot, you get Earl Grey hot with a side order of arsenic. Exactly. And now, mind you, it's not just the technology going out of control. We're combining it with the easiest ability to do it in such a high technological level by the fewest individuals, i.e., one person. Okay. So today we have auto companies, and an auto company will create airbag systems, or they will create braking systems, the electronic stability control systems and things. And at least here in the States, if we notice, if the airbags go out and they have a recall on airbags, you find out that, oh, these are the same airbags put in 18 models through the last 7 years of a certain automaker. Chrysler has a, 23 million car recall to fix a small part in the airbag because instead of buying 13 different types of airbags from different companies, one company is responsible for the one thing. And once we start to focus down our sources, say sources of food or medicine and things from one location, one company, one breed of banana. We talked about I'm going to mispronounce it, the Gros Michel or Gros Michel, Michel, Gros Michel. I'm butchering it, but you get my point. It is a biological banana that never existed in nature, but that banana now, Michel, the Gros Michel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That banana didn't exist in nature until someone modified it, and the original banana is like all but extinct now. Well, what happens when, say, a community's food source comes from one particular country? I'm going to pick Brazil, and let's say something that we all consume comes from one country, and then someone or somehow a disease is spread amongst the food in that particular location, then we no longer have biodiversity, and then we start to starve, right? So having a single individual may have the ability to, say, develop a nanotechnology that destroys oil, let's say, but because oil we know comes from is basically a fossil fuel. It's literally a liquefied fossil. Someone could design something to destroy that because our society runs on, and machines and automobiles run primarily on oil and the oil byproducts thereof. Plastics come from oil, diesel comes from oil, that kind of thing. So existential threats can come from, say, one individual that wants to create a biological hunter virus that kills everyone with red hair or brown eyes or a certain skin type or of a certain age or maybe even something strange as those of us with like bad eyesight, or some other strange, odd uh, genetic type that's being programmed so that only specific individuals of it will suffer from it. Now, we understand logically that creating, say, a virus or some kind of bacteria that eats flesh or something and cannot be cured will kill most likely the individual that created it, because it's very difficult to control viral vectors through any sort of practical means. That is, unless there's high technology. Someone could deposit this on an alien world. They could then escape and move to a sealed habitat and keep all other people out, thereby infecting the rest of these other planetary systems that are trying to stop it. So nanotechnology, viruses and plagues, bacteria are one of the most insidious things, because you won't know until there are victims. And then once those victims start to spread, patient zero gets hit and then it starts to spread from there. It's very difficult to track and maybe even stop it based on the skill of the individual that did it. There's also one major trope are weaponized systems that have been decommissioned or forgotten about or stolen, and others being able to use them. That's always a plot, stealing the codes and plans to make an atomic or nuclear weapon. And someone in their garage is like, oh, I looked up those plans online. The same thing goes for individuals today that get online and figure out ways to make their own explosives or their own IEDs, improvised explosive devices, and they get online and get that information. And so those individuals are able to essentially, through the least amount of people, through not having to expend that much time, energy, or resources, are able to do maximum amounts of damage. Pelor says you could easily get there by someone creating a bacteria to eat plastic, say to destroy it in the oceans or whatever, but then it mutates to go for oil as well. I absolutely agree with you. And that is one of the fears. There are many people today pushing for, like you said, hey, we can create our own essentially called a bacteria that can eat plastics. We want to create bacteria to destroy, say, landfills that are overcoming huge swaths of land in many of us first world countries or whatnot, and we're throwing away so much stuff, and we're just filling these landfills, and it's becoming toxic. And we even today we have nuclear waste, and trying to figure out how to get rid of nuclear waste by dumping it behind lead, behind concrete, behind more lead, and still the nuclear waste is still there, poisoning the soil or what have you. And some people even think, hey, let's launch it in spaceships and launch it towards the sun, even though the expense of doing that is unreasonable. But then we have the idea of what would it take for someone with very good intentions? Let's get rid of all the plastic and trash in our landfills, and it mutates some kind of way, either by accident. Maybe it mutates from some unforeseen force, such as just age. It could be mutating because of how our DNA frays at the ends. So the first generation, or even fifth generation, or 12th generation of bacteria is perfectly fine, but once you get past number 13 on, the programming frays on the ends, and it starts consuming anything that's remotely similar to plastics, meaning it could destroy oil, it could destroy surgical implants inside of people, their teeth and their bones and such, that has a relationship to plastic. All of a sudden, artificial turf where kids are playing in fields starts to go away, and the plastic dashboards of our cars start to deteriorate, and all of our Tupperware system things start to turn to sludge and melt inside of supermarkets and in our refrigerators, right? I mean, then you start thinking, well, wait a minute, what else is made out of plastic? Those darn little tabs on the ends of our shoelaces. No, not my Tupperware. Exactly. The little tags on the ends of sneakers, when you tie your shoelaces, start will go instantly, and all of us will be sitting here trying to lace our shoelaces and getting frustrated because we don't have the little tabs on the ends of them, right? Every single band-aid would just go away, So I think even most medical equipment would just dissolve into nothingness inside and outside the body. Um, a lot of plastics are used in casts and boots and implants and medical equipment and stuff. So yeah, it would just be horrific, and it could happen over one individual's thing. That's, again, let's circle back, the red button problem, right? Existential threats. So one of the main tropes used in eclipse phase is that uh, the player characters represent agents from an organization known as Firewall, and the Firewall agents are out there to stop existential threats. Now, we need to hit on some other existential threats as well to give you a full scope. But essentially, Firewall, or whatever your game you're playing, and this could absolutely be, so let's say you're a Dungeons and Dragons fanatic and you're like, I really can't pull anything from this. You absolutely can, especially if the PCs know about threats that can affect the entire world or even multiverse, and no one else knows about it or is accepting the fact that it's real, or understands that it's real, but no one is working. Maybe people are paralyzed in what they can do about it, or maybe far too many factions are fighting over petty things to do something about it. And the PCs could be fighting to stop, say, a membrane between worlds or a certain type of magic. A lich has unleashed a 10th level spell that is sweeping across the world, is able to undo reality. It's more powerful than even a wish spell. And through a simple word, this lich has done it. And the lich is like, running for cover, realizing what they've done. And the PCs are out to try to undo this, to undo the nothingness, that is there, much like, what's the movie? Never-Ending Story. and I believe it's a book. A Never-Ending Story, where what is it? It's nothing. You can't even see it. It's nothingness, and it's creeping and destroying everything. Now, other existential threats include the recovery, construction, and or development of black holes. Black holes are a thing that people really, really are like afraid of, because the idea is that a black hole could be created microscopically, and we could harness the energies that spill off of the event horizon, the corona of a black hole. And then everyone else even today there were people protesting the use of the Hadron Collider, I believe it's called, where you take two elements, you throw them around a 17-mile circle, you have them slam into each other and see what happens, right? And so people are like, wait a minute, now if you act, I see you're not only are you doing this, but you're literally trying to create or study how a black hole is made. Who's to say that you don't create a black hole on Earth and it starts to suck us all in little by little? Some may even feel that there may even be a black hole in the center of the Earth and other places. We think of black holes as being these massive objects, but usually that's the case is that the object itself isn't massive. Its effect around is massive. Rickard says, I have an order called the Red Library in my fantasy setting that focuses on trying to erase all knowledge that could lead to existential threats. And sometimes if we take even simple things, they could very well become a massive existential threat, right? Like, for example, let's go Dungeons and Dragons. There's a cult, and the cult is a very nihilistic cult. They feel that life is meaningless, and one day the elder god, it could be Cthulhu or whatever, Ahriman or Hades or whoever, jackal-headed death god is coming for us, or some Egyptian-styled god is coming to us, and they've given up their life. They're a death cult, and they know in a particular time and day they're all going to disrobe in public and drink a potion, and that potion might be a black ooze or a gray, black pudding, gray ooze, green, black pudding, gray ooze, green something, gelatinous cube, ogre jelly. Come on, you guys, you guys know the classics, rot grubs or something, right? They drink it down and just imagine thousands of people doing this all at the same time. How would that spread? Like it would be like the blob spreading, bursting, chest bursting, and coming out of the mouths and ears and noses of these individuals that have given themselves over to this death cult. And then cities upon cities are just overcome by this sludge that's just consuming life. The zombie apocalypse, a very traditional existential threat. Zombie apocalypse spread by rabies, biting the next person, spreading the blood disease. Ricker goes on to say that to the point of how can I use something like the firewall in my fantasy settings? You could make anything into a you were referring to, well, Rickard refers to the red library in his fantasy setting, and trying to erase all knowledge that could lead to existential threat, is saying, making the point that to the point, how can I use something like firewall in my fantasy setting? Correct. Where there could be, let's say, using Rickard's example in his own fantasy world, like the red library, there could be sages or very intelligent, the intelligentsia. They have the knowledge, but they don't have the manpower to go around and stop these threats. And the PCs might be recruited from all walks of life. The noble paladin and the sneaky assassin may all need to work together, looking at each other like grunting, like, you're evil. I know your alignment too. We're going to fight each other at some point, and then they're like, well, wait a minute. There's a greater threat, guys. And if we don't stop this magic from getting out, it's going to destroy everything. And so, temporarily, permanently, they have to work together to achieve this greater threat. And of course, role-playing issues could happen as they talk about their own philosophies. And do those philosophies even matter when life is about to end, or even reality itself might be unmade or something? Yeah. Now, Pelor says you could make anything into a black hole if you manage to compress it below its Schwarzschild radius. I didn't know it was called the Schwarzschild radius, but yes, just about anything could be made into a black hole. It's about collapsing that matter down into a singularity, because black holes are supermassive constructs, or naturally created through the collapse of matter and energy. And yeah, there is a fear. Now, we've read or seen science fiction where engines are powered by black holes. And if you ever listen to Isaac Arthur, who has a great YouTube channel and other things related to the YouTube channel, where it's completely dedicated to the super sciences, the development of sciences into the far future, and talks about harnessing black holes and the energy that are around them, and that as our society goes up the scale of spreading throughout the universe, that we may use black holes as an energy source. But you guys know me, I'm a big fan of doing things in the middle, right? Before society gets to the point where we're encapsulating or having energy beacons hovering around black holes using for energy, there's going to be at least one mistake, a minimum of one mistake. How dangerous is that one mistake going to be, right? And so just like our own modern day, there was for those who don't know and weren't born weren't cognizant of the events that happened in the 80s, there is the HBO show Chernobyl, which is a dramatization of what happened during the Chernobyl event in, I believe it was border of Russia and Ukraine at that particular time, where the nuclear power plant melted down, and the effects that happened. Yeah, we make mistakes, and I'm sure there were plenty of people electrocuted when electricity was used. There are many people who were poisoned and or caught on fire, trying to harness oil, and that's going to happen through. Oh, thank you, Dead Man. Dead Man puts into the Fantasy Grounds College Discord down here in the DBJ chat down in the boiler room, the link to the Schwarzschild radius. Now, Pelor says, going on to talk about goes on to say that they'd instantly evaporate at tiny scales through, though, from Hawking radiation. And Rickard says technically you have Mordenkainen's order in D&D as well. Yeah, so the the radiation coming off of a black hole is also dangerous in and of itself. As the black hole starts to rip apart matter and energy, it starts to fling things out into a much like the rings around Saturn. There's going to be this matter and energy colliding around it and flung apart as the particles start to fall into the black hole. It actually starts to fling things out and does start to make a ring around it. And that its existence may be horrible, but the stuff being flung out from around it may be a hazard in and of itself. And if we take that into, say, something medieval, like Mordenkainen's order, may be thinking like Mordenkainen's like, listen, I'm going to deal with the black hole. I need you guys to deal with the materials flung out from it. And that could very well be like Mordenkainen's going to the, maybe there's a hidden plane of existence of absolute nothingness that encapsulates or is growing into the other far planes. But the D&D characters are the membranes between all of the planar worlds. Is, Dungeon Master's like, hey, I got my copy of Planescape. I'm going to translate it to 5th edition. And so maybe the planes are the membranes start to blend together and start to thin. And so the PCs are trying to keep order in a world where the rest of it is starting to collapse. So I definitely think that we can use a lot of those elements. One other strange existential threat to you're fine. Pelora posts in the Discord a link to YouTube, a short horror about drones which can target and kill people. Yeah. Another existential threat is the idea that we create something that at the moment is quite beneficial, but given time is no longer beneficial. Much like the bacteria to eat plastic, but then starts to destroy oil. In eclipse phase, Earth has undergone a major conflict with the Titans, and it doesn't really matter. Earth is a wasteland of sorts, and in your own setting, you can decide, just how much of humanity still exists and on Earth. But the idea is that Earth is surrounded by kinetic kill machines, and Earth has been quarantined off. So during a major conflict or an uprising or what have you, there could essentially be machines that were created during a war, and everyone's like, great, we have these great machines. Let's use them during a war. The war ends, and as the years, tens of years, dozens, hundreds of years pass by, those machines might still be in use. I believe there was even an episode of Star Trek where there was I believe it was Star Trek, where there was a planetary killing missile that was on its way to destroy another planet from a long lost war. And it just happened to be floating around there in space. And they had to try to stop it and deprogram it. And it had defense mechanisms, and it was going to burrow into the planetary core of this other planet and destroy that planet. And of course, so many years have passed that people forget about these things. Landmines are a perfect example of, in our modern culture, of, at the time, landmines were a great idea. Hey, we put down landmines. You can't cross this territory. You're going to blow a leg off. It demoralizes the people around you. Great. We've just created this thing. Great. Cool. Landmines are still out there after the wars are done. And so there were whole communities of innocent people walking around and discovering these landmines. Now, imagine, if you will, very highly technical machines that have an efficiency that allows them to live, allows them to operate efficiently for hundreds, thousands of years. Maybe there's even some kind of self-replicating or self-repairing mechanism inside of them. Or maybe there's a way for them to go dormant to allow them to survive long periods of time until awakened by some outside signal. It could be radiation. It could be a radio signal. It could be some kind of biological sensor. It could be breaking a quarantine that wakes up these machines. There could be nefarious plans where there are criminals or hackers or something that are out there to destabilize the mechanisms that are drawing power off of the black hole. You could even have the same thing where in a medieval world where there are people hired to break into the wizard's tower and steal and steal the black book from the red tower in the library of the red library and the wizards and such, and someone steals it. And sure, the agent is like, I'm just being paid to steal it, whatever. But someone there wants to find this hidden knowledge. Why are they hiding it from us? It's been 5 generations. They don't understand. They're just like, why is someone trying to hide this information? They're keeping things from us. All information should be free and allowed to go out there. And right people, we should rebel. And everyone's like, yeah, they're hiding things from us. They're hiding in the shadows, not realizing that the faction might be like, listen, we need to hide this stuff from you guys for your own good. And again, a lot of this is based on perception as well. For example, an existential threat is terraforming a planet for us to live on it. If we go to an alien world where we are unaware of or didn't have prior knowledge of, or we know there is, but we ignore the fact that there's other sentient life there or non-sentient life. And there is the idea that, hey, you know what? Maybe when humanity colonizes these other worlds, that we are destroying life there through terraforming, and we are creating an existential threat through some other outside people that we might be encountering. So we go there and we're like, oh, it's bacteria, but whatever, we're going to colonize it. And then the other alien species is like, excuse me, that bacteria are our children because that's how we reproduce. We're going to have a war against your kind. And the humans are like, we didn't know. I didn't know. There's always that. Yeah, Rickard, I hear you say, seems relevant to the discussion. Yeah. And there's also the possibility that and let's go back to Dungeons and Dragons. An existential threat might be created by people doing things unwittingly. All of your pyromancers are thinning the membrane between, say, the elemental plane of fire. Every time the druids go and use their wild shape and their abilities, that the wildness of the land is starting, the prehistoric nature of the world is starting to creep in and creep into modern society, that cities are literally being overrun by plants that you can literally watch and see them growing inch by inch, hour by hour. And they're literally causing this creeping death. And maybe the druids are like, there's a small sect of druids like, look, we want to keep our natural habitats protected, but we didn't want to eliminate all life, making it bestial or something. That wasn't our point. But that very well could be the background of the element, right? What Rickard, give me the context for what you posted there. Yeah, there's a yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's if you check out the Discord, man, Rickard posted a blurb. I'm not sure where you got that from. Oh, it's from Mass Effects about weapons that just keep on going. Okay. Yeah, this recruits a 20-kilo ferrous slug. Feel the weight. Every 5 seconds, the main gun of an Everest-class dreadnought accelerates 1.3% of light speed. It impacts with the force of a 38-kiloton bomb. That is 3 times the yield of the City Buster dropped on Hiroshima back on Earth. That means Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest, deadliest, as he redacted, taking out all the curse words. I hear you. Yeah, the deadliest, woohoo, in space. Now, Surface Mr. Burnside, what is Newton's first law? Yeah, there it is. Yeah, sir, an object in motion stays in motion, sir. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but that is a perfect example, right? Hey, object in motion stays in motion. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's science, right? Yeah, until a, a whole planet, a moon, is used as a kinetic kill weapon from, I don't know, 38,000 years ago, and it's barreling through space at sublight speeds to impact another alien armada. And much like people celebrating and shooting bullets into the air to celebrate Independence Day here, which whatever, those bullets have to come back somewhere, right? In space, if you fire off a kinetic kill weapon in the vacuum of space, it will keep going if you miss the target. And will keep going and keep going, and it going at sublight speeds, it will hit something else. As a matter of fact, most starships, no, I take that back. Every starship that's moving through the vastness of space in and of itself is automatically a kinetic kill weapon. As long as it's moving at the proper speed, high enough speed, even the smallest thing is a kinetic kill weapon. Much like the meteorites that slam through the atmosphere of Earth, given enough speed and mass, our atmosphere burns most of them up. But there's actual video evidence of meteorites striking in around the greater Russian population. I forget when it happened. It was relatively, I want to say last 10 or 15 years happened, and it just blasted. There was no way humanity would even be able to see them. We actually only saw the contrails of those meteorites slamming into the earth, and that the light was so bright some people were blinded by it. Deadman says in Star Trek The Next Generation, there was also the mercantile race that used their weapon of defense or war as marketing, and the only way to get out of it was to make an offer for it. I don't remember that, but I'm presuming it relates to, like, are you saying that there was a race that was basically saying that we have a weapon of mass destruction, and if you don't buy it, someone else will buy it? Yeah. Yeah, Tesla. Yeah. Quote, peace through superior firepower. Exactly. And that is a very dangerous, that's how the Cold War, the idea of the mid 70s to 80s Cold War, well, maybe late 60s to mid 80s Cold War existed, right? That it was, we're going to create weapons. No, we're going to create more weapons. We're going to create weapons. And the threat of the bigger, better, more powerful weapon, anti-weapon, weapon busting weapon. We're going to put weapons in, the race to the moon was a Cold War effort. They're going to make orbital weapons. Great. We're going to go to the moon. And that was a threat. The Star Wars program about putting things in space that could shoot down ICBMs was a was a Cold War kind of event. And so you could have in your game, no matter whether it's far future, modern day, or Dungeons and Dragons, you could have people basically having a Cold War. Oh, the Lich over in the West is building its army, while the the five dragons are building their armies also into the east, while up in the north there's the undead vampires lords or something are assembling magics that have been never researched before. But down in the east there's a wizards coven, and they want to stop all the other ones, and there could be a great Cold War as they're scavenging the world for magic items and magic and power, and making deals with powers that should not be made deals with. Yep. Peace through power, the technology of peace. Yeah. Ricker says that is why you check your that is why you check your redacted targets. That is why you wait till the computer gives you a redacted firing solution. That is why, Serviceman Chung, we do not eyeball it. Yeah. Because you fire a kinetic kill weapon and it misses its target, unless it impacts something, well, eventually it will impact something. So, we, as a matter of fact, there is the idea that firing high-powered lasers from starships in space, those laser beams will go on forever. Once the light is expended from the starships, that they could extend 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times to the logical or practical range of the weapon being used itself. Yeah, Rickard says it will impact something somewhere. Now, of course, we think of kinetic kill weapons, orbital satellites dropping things down on the planet, onto our planetary source, but say a railgun launching, say, materials off of the moon could be manipulated into becoming a kinetic kill styled weapon. We already know and I'm not making light of this, we already know there are kinetic kill weapons in our own life because we've seen airplanes impact the Twin Towers. And so something does not need to move at sublight speeds to be kinetic kill. It just needs to be something that is either too large, moving too fast, or something that cannot be stopped, that is moving towards a particular method. Maybe you could even, this is strange enough, but there is the movie Snowpiercer. And in the movie Snowpiercer, the setting is a train that is traveling on a track around the world. And the train is moving at a very fast rate. The rest of humanity is dead, and the only remaining members of humanity live on this very long train that's traveling around the world. And in effect, in a strange kind of way, that is in and of itself an existential threat, meaning that these people are only alive because this train keeps moving. What happens if it derails? What happens when it stops? Will humanity live outside of this derailed system? Because this train system, because at some point, somewhere, someone's going to try to stop the train or derail the train. Those living in a bunker down underground after a nuclear war, if someone tries to open up the hatch, that is an existential threat for the people still living inside of the hatch. And sometimes it could be a fear of the unknown versus a fear of the known and not knowing what would happen if you delve further into the known. Pillar says, ruin someone's picnic a few million years in the future. Absolutely. If you fire off some kind of laser weapon or kinetic kill weapon off into space, some machine that's incorruptible, designed so it could never be hacked from an outside source, and you release the factory that releases the AIs, the Terminator, it in a strange way is an existential threat. It just will not stop. Now you could easily turn that into a Dungeons and Dragons thing where there are like iron golems or stone golems that were activated, much like the Warforged, to be non-sentient killing machines that are becoming awakened because, I don't know, maybe explorers went down into a pit and found them, or maybe they were walking across the vast oceans 387 years ago and they finally came up on shore. They were dumped off of a ship many years ago, or someone quarantined them on an island and someone visited the island and they commandeered their craft and took the sailing craft back to civilization or something. And maybe the whole setting could be the remnants of a vast war from many, many years ago. And the PCs are like doing the faceplant, like, oh, I can't believe we unleashed this thing onto the world. Or maybe they're just living in a world where the machines or the programming or even the magics are now released into the world after being dormant for so long. There's even the possibility that I could even imagine a possibility that humanity doesn't even resemble what it used to look like, much like, say, a War of the Gods. And the War of the Gods went on and on, and no one knows when it stopped. In actuality, it never stopped. A couple hundred years is just the taking the nap. It's the recovering before the gods go back to war yet again. And that could very much be the idea that the PCs are in the middle of a conflict that's stretched for much longer, and humanity will be eliminated if they still exist. Now, of course, we can pick other things that could kill off humanity. Poison gases, of course, we talked about bacterias. Gravity could change. The very landscape could change itself, meaning that something that I hold dear. I love environmental effects. So maybe at some point in the past, people could have society could have remembered a paradise, pristine waters and rainbows and sunlight that just shined on everyone, and everything was of a temperature that was, not too hot, not too cold. There was all these spring rains, just light enough to reflect the sunlight. And fast forward, a couple 100,000 years, and there are no pristine beaches. There's just storm waters, and the sun barely shines through dark clouds, and necrotic lightning strikes out from the sky, and there are earthquakes and volcanoes and poison gases and geysers of flame released from the ground. And you know only a fool would travel on a ship on the vast oceans, or even up rivers and such, because of whirlpools and breakers and white-capped waves that just crush everything. And you never know, there might be thick fog and torrential rain and heat waves and brutal cold, and each of those things may happen hour by hour in this corrupted world. That could very much be an existential threat, where the balance, let's say the elemental evil series, could be out of control, and the elemental princes or elemental powers are vying for dominance in the prime material plane, and the plane of fire is trying to break through, making a deal, a treaty, or temporary a temporaryism with the plane of Earth. I don't know, launch itself some flames from under the earth so that the lava starts to spew forth, and the PCs need to break the treaty between them because of just such a thing. I mean, that could very, very well be a of concern, and the PCs might be tasked with solving a thing, and humanity might be hidden away in the last save enclaves. Now, the other existential threat, and sometimes I believe even in our modern context, some people think this is an existential threat, and perception makes reality. One existential threat is the threat of losing ourselves. It is the elimination of ourselves biologically, and the elimination of ourselves sociologically as well. And some people fear the unknown. And for those who feel like transhumanism is paramount to, I don't know, Satanism or something, fears that we will lose our connection to spirituality, that death and the fear of death, the overwhelming fear of death, is what motivates humanity to do great works, so that we can live forever because of the things that we generate in our own society. So art and the raising of children and the erecting of buildings and the study of the sciences and all those kinds of things, the ephemeral in our world, the saving of national parks and the environment, the protection of supporting one's political party, or supporting a specific thing, maybe like, I don't know, feeding hungry kids in school, or saving the whales, or any number of things that people have. Some people feel that the losses of these, whether they're rights, or the loss of our own culture, or loss of our own genetic stock, in and of itself is an existential threat, that by its disappearance, we lose ourselves, and thereby life becomes, there is no purpose to continue on in life, right? We understand as a society that scientifically that the earth will die off for whatever reason. Radiation will kill us off, probably. Some people feel like a bacteria. The earth will fall into the sun will go Is it the sun going supernova? Come on, remind me. Anyway, the sun's stability will no longer be in effect. Let's put it that way. Could be a solar flare. We could destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons. But there are many people who say, no, I think if we achieve a certain level of advancement, that we will get to the point where we eliminate some of those external threats. And some people feel that the internal threat of, say, social media is in and of itself ourselves walking towards an existential threat. Um, there are hackers who feel that secrets held along are existential threats. So sometimes we can shape the idea of the red button problem, meaning that there's one individual who has their finger over the red button. The threat may or may not be real, but that individual feels that that threat is real. And we can absolutely wrap a ton of gaming elements around that. There's always going to be someone in our tabletop RPG setting that feels that if X plus Y will equal Z, right? If the Dragonborn breed to the point where they have and we give the Dragonborn their own nation, they're going to destroy us all because the dragons will take over everything, right? It's there is a mad cult of wizards, and they are trying to turn themselves. They're trying to discover the secrets of lichdom, and if we allow them to discover the secrets of lichdom, they are going to destroy the world and control everything. There's the people who say, you know what, the elves live forever. They think they're better than the rest of us, and if we allow them to step one foot into our political system at all, they're going to take over everything. They live much longer than us. They have us outthought. They have us outlived. And if we don't do something about it, they're going to take over everything. Now, many of us in the RPG community have already thought about those things. Well, if dragons existed, wouldn't they control everything? And you can fill in the blank with that, right? It's if dragons existed, if vampires existed, if elves existed, go on down the line. If these things existed, they would take over the world. Why wouldn't they be in control? And my contention is, you're probably right. Now, again, you guys know me. Drama happens when there's conflict. If there is no conflict, there's no drama. And without drama, there really isn't a game. Now, the after effects of it, the in-between effects, I love that. Sure, maybe in your setting, the elves really are about to dominate the world because they know better. They live for, I don't know, 1,000 years or 800 years or whatever. And they are out there trying to become the rulers of the world because, well, we're children. You guys are just children. We know better. And in their own minds, they're like, yeah, of course we're better at ruling. I mean, look at our society. It's much better than yours, isn't it? And you people are barbaric and killing each other and blah, blah, blah. We're going to take over. And maybe that is the whole point of the setting, that little by little they are taking over. And the PCs, maybe even some elven PCs, are working with other races and cultures to stop this incursion. Maybe the elves are like, if we don't take over, the dragons will take over. That's why we're keep treating you like children, because if we don't do it, someone else will do it. And the only way to stop the dragons and, that wizard's cabal turning into liches and the vampires up in the north, the only way to stop them is you need to trust us, and we are better than you. And that could literally be the culmination of a setting that they're in the middle of it. Now, of course, you can do a post-apocalyptic version of it where the PCs are a rebel force in a world that has been taken over by dragons and has been taken over by liches, and playing throughout that. Now, even since we've gotten to the end here, the continued existential threats, of course, are delving into piercing the barrier between worlds, that opening up a wormhole or time travel. These kind of things may also be threats to our own world as well, because it's much like if you look into the abyss stares right back at you. And some people feel like just literally some people feel that once time travel, some scientists feel that time travel will never exist because if it did exist, we would already know that time travel exists today. So no matter how long it takes time travel to exist, if it ever existed, we would already know it existed. Others feel that one day we might find time travel and we should never delve into it because once you have time travel, all it takes is for one person to unravel time travel. Pillar-ist says time travel does exist. I believe scientists have realized that there are like certain particles and things. Now I'm in the future. See, wait a minute. Did you just go back in time and exactly right? Now I do understand that some scientists feel that there are like particles that essentially travel through time, quantum energies and chaos theory and all that kind of stuff. But we're talking about individuals going through time, which is of course its own setting, right? Like Time Cop or Sliders or Quantum Leap or something like that, which some people may feel has its own existential threats of trying to get back to their own time and or the collapse of their own universe, much like the Thanos being, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is an existential threat. All right, love you, baby. Have a great one. All right. The Heraldrix has called upon the end of our sessions today. Yeah, travel back in time. How do I know? Because I come from the future. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for being a part of this and allowing me to ramble and bring up subjects that are kind of strange and kooky and just basically a lot of food for thought. You guys know me. I come up with some ideas. I try not to predetermine the outcome of a lot of these discussions, and I hope anyone who's really into long form discussions really appreciates this. Yeah, it is it a lot to chew on a lot of times, sure. But yes, and just as a reminder for everyone out there, a little plug, there is this channel is on SoundCloud, so we have some past episodes being uploaded to SoundCloud as we speak. I will start uploading some of the older episodes and some of the new ones, kind of going back and forth, giving people a little taste of everything. I've kind of organized them into playlists as well, and of course, go over to Fantasy Grounds College if you want to learn about Fantasy Grounds. Myself, I'm the contributing writer over Critical Hit Publishing. My baby is the Cinematic Environs, blah, yada yada yada. All that information is located below. Anyway, guys, have a great one. Have a great week. I'll see you Monday. Happy gaming.